So, Mike, we last left off with you discussing a bit of August 1967, but at the same time, you caught malaria. And how did that happen?
Um, I guess a mosquito bit me. That I know for sure. Other than that, I don't know. I stopped taking my malaria pill. They gave us this big malaria pill, and you had to swallow it whole. You couldn't chew it. And I just got tired of taking it. I saw guys who had been taking it getting malaria, and I said, well, my chances are probably the same as theirs. And so I stopped taking it I think I stopped in April. And I was medevaced on July 25th from Mylock 2 to 1st Med Battalion, Da Nang, into their malaria ward.
Well, and what effects did malaria have on you and your experience with it?
So I've been sick. I've had illnesses since, and I can't compare anything to it. Um, it was 95 degrees out, and when my radio operator opened, I had been sick a couple of days before. Doc thought it might have just been the flu because it wasn't going around, and but the day before the medevac, my temperature got up to about 102, 102.5, and so he gave me some medicine, and he said, I'll take a look at you the next morning. Well, the next morning came, and my radio operator, Ron, woke me up because I wasn't stirring. And when he woke me up, I was laying back on my rubber lady, and I was just sweating and shaking. And I had my wool military blanket over me, and I was still cold. And Ron knew at that time, my radio operator, something was wrong, and he went and got I forgot who the corpsman was. It might have been Doc Lansbury, but I'm not sure. And he took my temperature. It was over. It was getting to 100, 105, and he knew at that point I had malaria. So he called for a priority medevac, which is unusual for malaria, but because of the temperature, when I talked to him when I got back, said it was the temperature that made me medevac you so quickly. And so the medevac was there in 15, 20 minutes, I guess. I don't remember a whole lot about it. But took me to 1st Med Battalion. I got off, and they put me on a stretcher and took me into the ward. And I immediately, as soon as they put me down and took my temperature, they said, we got to get him into an ice bath. So they took me to this room where they had an ice bath, and they put me in it to get my temperature down. And they kept doing that for I think it was the next 24 hours, because they couldn't give me any medicine because they didn't know which strain of malaria I had. There's Valciparum, and then there's Vivax. Both lethal. Vivax lasts a little longer, but I had Valciparum, the weaker strain, I guess. But it wasn't weak to me. I mean, it wasn't weak to me. It did a pretty good job on me, so much so that they literally sent my recruiter and a chaplain to my home to tell my family that I had. Then they don't do it for malaria, but they decided this time to send them to my family. And of course, I don't know if I told you the story, but when they went to the door, and my sister and my mom answered, and they asked my mom, they said, are you Mrs. Donna Vidal? And she said, yes. Are you the son of Lance Corporal Michael O'Hare? And she said, she didn't say anything. She just fell. She fainted right there. Sure, she thought they were going to tell her I was dead. But when she finally came to, he told her, your son's has not passed away. He does have malaria, a very, very bad malaria, and the doctors give him 60-40 chance of no survival. We thought you should know, because we'll give you a chance to pray, contact your God, and pray and prepare it. Prepare for it if it happens. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but um, uh, the the powers that be decided that I should come and tell you, and I've told you. And he says, "Is there anything I can do for you?" And then he prayed for me, and it was cut and dry for 3 days. And the main purpose, or the main problem, was they couldn't find out what strain I had. They were having difficulty with the blood test, and because they mimic, a lot of the testing mimics, the two mimic each other, and they have to be correct in the medicine they give you, because it can cause really bad side effects, up to including death. And I think it was the end of the second day, maybe the beginning of the third day, the test finally showed that I had falciparum. And so they began the medication. I was still going back and forth to the ice bath. And 24 hours after they gave me the medication, I started to feel better. By no means was I I couldn't get out of bed, I couldn't eat, but my temperature dropped. I didn't have to go to the ice bath anymore. So we continued to just continue to give me the medicine. And they reached the point 8, 9 days after that where they were able to stop the medicine. And I was on the mend, and I sat up for the first time in 10 days. And that was an interesting thing, because I was very dizzy. And but they told me I was out of the woods, and everything would be okay. And so they kept me another 4 or 5 days. I had lost about 19 pounds, and they decided to send me and 3 other Marines to Cameron Bay. Cameron Bay has a rehabilitation center for malaria patients, and they don't send everybody there, but they send soldiers and Marines and whoever else gets it to Cameron Bay to rehab. They feed you steak, potatoes. I mean, you got really fed good to put meat back on you. You ran, you exercised, and we were the only 4 Marines there too, and the rest were Air Force and Army, of course. The instructors that trained us were also Army. Oh, and they hated Marines. They absolutely hated Marines. And
Well, why did they hate the Marines?
they're Army. It's inbred in them. I mean, it was the same thing from our side. I mean, I never hated the Army. I mean, I didn't know anything about the Army. I know they fought, and they fought well, but these guys just didn't like Marines. And so we did extra. They kept us over to do extra PT, because they didn't think that they thought we had slacked off during the PT. And one of the guys, Big John, he was a farm boy from Iowa. He was with 3-5, and I don't remember which company, but he stood about 6'4" and weighed about 220 pounds. He was in great shape. And but we knew that they were just hassling us. They got us up early. They kept us late. They wouldn't let us go to the enlisted club and grab a few beers. And what else did they do? Oh, we definitely couldn't go to the movies. So one day we got tired of it. We had been there only about 5 or 6 days, and we got tired of it. And so Big John hatched this plan that we'd go when they left that night, because they always left from their barracks, and it was just a 2-man barrack. There's only two instructors in there, and it was these 2 instructors of ours. And so we went in, and one of the guys, the Marines, I only remember Bob, because he was quite a guy. But so he started doing stuff to their personal items. They took and dumped the aftershave out of the bottle, and they peed in it. And one guy actually took a dump in the guy's boots, and then they put black shoe polish around the band of their Smokey the Bear hat. And then we got out of there, and the next day, and while we were standing in formation, you could tell they knew already. We could tell that they knew, and so after we finished our PT and that, the best part of it was though when they took their hat off, and they had a big black band around their foreheads. Didn't even know it was on there. And everybody just started busting up laughing. And so the guy told them. And afterwards, he said, "I know you guys are the ones who did it." And he said, "You're going to get it from here on out." So we did do it. We didn't admit we did it, but so that night we were able to go to the club, and we sat down. We ordered beer, and then these two guys came in, these two instructors with a couple buddies of theirs, and they got a table about 10 feet away from us. And we were just sitting there laughing. I mean, we were busting up, and they probably thought it was about them, but it wasn't. But they came over and they said the same thing, "We know it was you. We know it was you, and we're going to get you for this." And John, he just looked at him. He said, "What is it you think we did?" And he said, "We know you did it. We know you did it." And he goes, "What do you think we did? We didn't do anything." He said, we don't go anywhere, and we don't do anything. You've pretty much locked us down to our barracks." And so one thing led to another, and one of the guys reached across to grab the other Marine who was sitting. I was here, he was there, John was here facing him, and he reached to grab him, and Big John grabbed him and just pulled the guy across the table and threw him down. And then from there, the fight was on, and the MPs came and broke it up, and they let those guys go, and they took us to the brig. And within an hour or two, we were standing before their company commander, or whatever, who their commander was. He was a captain, and he told us what happened. He said, "This is what these guys said." I said, and we said, "No, sir, we didn't do that. They don't have any evidence at all that we did that. Why would we even do that? I mean," and he says, "I believe you did it, and there's no evidence that you did it, so I can't really press charges, but I can get you for disorderly conduct and insubordination. And so I'm going to write each of you up, and I'm going to send a letter to your commanding officer at your unit." So, and he said, "Another thing I'm doing," he says, I'm getting you to hell out of here within the next 24 hours. And so within 24 hours, we were on another aircraft back to Da Nang, and we arrived in Da Nang, and we went, I couldn't get a flight back to Anwar that night. And so two or three of us stayed over. The other Marine, he got a ride back to, because he came from Cam Low. And so we all stayed in the barracks that they have for guys that are on R&R. They come back, they can't get a ride, they can sleep. And we went to the club that night again and had a few beers, and we laughed our head out about what, we just laughed what we did. And I mean, at the time it was so funny. And got back to the base the next day, got back to Anwar. As soon as I reported into the 81 platoon, my gunny says, "You need to go see Captain." He was he was a brand new our brand new platoon commander, Fuller, Captain Fuller. And Captain Fuller said, "I got this thing here, right here, from this captain down in Cameron Bay. Said you did some things and put down what we did." And I said, "Sir, we didn't do those things. They have no evidence whatsoever. We didn't do those things. There's no evidence we did them. We just didn't do them." And And besides, I said, even if we had done it, we would have been justified what the Army guys were doing to us. And I said, they treated us like crap. And he said, and then the one thing when I told the my company commander, I said, sir, it said, the captain told us that the Army put the Marines up in northern I Corps to be on the defense while the Army down here is doing all the fighting. And when he said that to us, we just laughed. I mean, we all laughed. And so we just, I talked about it. When I told him that about the Marine Corps being in the north to stay out of the Army's way, he goes, he said that? And he goes, yes, sir. I said, he did say it. And he goes, okay, get out of here. I got to figure some punishment out for you. So I was walking out and he just looked at me and called me, said, laughed, smiled, and I went away. And the next day he says, your punishment is you have to go to the movies tonight. So that was it. But I got back I think it was 17th, 18th of August. And Echo Company was at Fullock 6, but I couldn't go because my CO said, you got to get cleared by the doctor here at the BAS. And I said, sir, I feel fine. I don't feel bad at all. He says, you look like you've lost some weight. Gunny said that. And I said, I lost a lot of weight while I had malaria, but I gained a lot of it back. And so I went, he said, you were okay. I practically pleaded with him to let me go. And so he said, you're clear to go. And so I packed my bag and I caught a convoy around midday after the mine sweep was done. Then the convoy from Anwa was able to go to Fullock 6. And they had, since I left, I was medevaced out of Mylock 2. But while I was away, they just totally shut down Mylock 2 as a platoon base of operations. It made no sense. So we were so close to each other, 1,000, 1,500 meters. And so I reported back to Captain Kinder and told me, he said, well, Thumper, you've been gone a long time. And I said, I'm sorry, sir, but I wouldn't have gone, but I was pretty sick. And he said, well, you got here in just in time because we're going to do a patrol right now. He said, they had a new staff sergeant come in and the platoon commander wanted him to get some field experience. So he was going to lead a little patrol around Fullock 6, go to the south around Mylock 2, come in where the Thubon River is, and then back to Fullock 6. And so my radio operator, Ron, nicknamed this guy Buck Rogers. He was really gung-ho. I mean, when he got the platoon, because it was only a platoon patrol, and he was a new platoon commander of, I think it was 2nd platoon, I'm not certain, but so not the platoon commander, platoon sergeant. And so he was real gung-ho, and he had his stateside utilities on, and he was ready to go. He was also a drill instructor, and so he took us out on the op, and he wanted, for some reason, he wanted me to march with the platoon or the squad in the back, which made no sense, unless he knew something I didn't know. But I heard for the call of 81's up, and I ran to the front with my radio operator just in time to see 2 Vietnamese men running out of a rice paddy into the village of Mylock 2. One of them was carrying a hoe. I could tell it was a hoe, wasn't a weapon, and the other guy had nothing. And he looked at me and he said 81 FO, and he didn't call me Thumper. I don't even think he knew my name, but he said, I want you to call a fire mission in on that target. And I said, Sergeant, you want me to call a fire mission on that target? I asked him why. And he said, the 2 VC just ran in there. And I said, no, I said, Sergeant, I saw it. My radio operator saw it. The one was carrying a hole and the other one was carrying nothing. I'm not going to fire a mission on that village. When we were at Mylock 2, we knew these people. These people brought us fish to eat. They brought us rice. They even brought us ice. Where the heck they got it, we don't know. But nobody ever got sick from their food or anything. We gave them sea rats. Our corpsmen treated their youngsters. And this guy wants me to call on a fire mission on it. And I said, no, I said, I won't do it. And he said, you either call it or you either call in the mission or I will put you on report when we get back to Fulak 6. And Ron, my radio operator, said, do it. He said, you'll get in trouble. I said, I ain't gonna do it. So I did it, but I put the first round in the middle of the rice paddy where they were working. And the staff sergeant got extremely angry. He said, put the round on target. And so I made an adjustment. And the next round, I put it in the middle of the Song Thuban River, both white phosphorus rounds. And that ended it right there. He said, you're on report as of now. I went back to, I think I told this story, didn't I? But I went back to Fulak 6 and he immediately told the platoon commander, who told Captain Kinder, who called me in. I went in with Sergeant Lackey because Sergeant Lackey wasn't an FO. He trained me and I wanted someone to go with me. And he said, effective immediately, you're relieved of your duties and you will catch the convoy when it comes and go back to Anwa. And so I said, aye, sir. He never asked me. He never let me, I should say, give my side of what happened. And the grunts were behind me. They weren't for him. They knew, they saw it. And but I went back and I had to stand. I walked in. They said, "You go to the company commander's office. They're waiting for you." So I walked in. There was a platoon commander, our company commander, the company first sergeant, and my company gunny, and that artillery forward observer I admired so much. And they started grilling me and asking me what happened. And the artillery guy just flat out accused me of incompetence. You just didn't know how, like you couldn't hit the target. And I said, no, sir, that's not why. I said, Captain Kinder wasn't interested in why. He wouldn't even let me explain. So if you let me explain, I'll tell you what happened. And they did. And I told them exactly what happened. I said, my radio operator is down in his hooch right now. All you have to do is call him. He'll verify what happened. And you can go out to Fulak 6 yourself and interview the grunts who were there. If you find one grunt who says that what I did wasn't right, then I'll come back and I'll go back to the mortar platoon, because I don't want to be sitting under judgment for every decision I made. It was a violation of the rules of engagement as well as the rules of law to open fire on civilians, and I just wasn't going to do it. If we'd have taken one shot from that village, I would have hit it to protect the Marines. But we took nothing. These guys ran in there. They just ran in there because they were scared. Every time we go into a village, sir, these people run. They're afraid of us, and rightfully so. I mean, when you got guys like the staff sergeant who wants to drop rounds on them. I mean, he said, "Did you tell the staff sergeant he could do it himself?" I did. I assume he was capable of doing it, but I just wasn't going to do it. I said, I came to Vietnam to help these people. I didn't come to Vietnam to kill them. I'll kill the enemy, but not the people, not like that. And so they called Ron in. They let me go and called Ron in. He verified everything I said. And then they had a discussion with Captain Kinder. And they told him what happened. And so I waited. They said, you'll have to wait. We'll have to reach a decision on Nina. And the lieutenant, the artillery lieutenant, he just continued to badger me in there. And I looked at my CO and I said, sir, may I please be excused? And I got up and left him talking to himself. So I waited. The next morning, I was coming back from chow, and Dan Nagan, Corporal Nagan, who was a good buddy of mine, he said, just got the word. He was the ammo sergeant of the 4th section. And he said, Gunny wants to see you in his office. So I went and walked in. He said, get your gear together. You've been reinstated. Go back to Lock 6. So I went back immediately. I reported to Captain Kinder and came back and checked in and told him I was ready for duty. And he asked me, he said, I want to hear it from you what happened. And I told him exactly like I told everybody else. I said, sir, you could have avoided this if you had just asked me instead of just, I said, this guy was green. And I'm sure you've probably talked to some of the Marines. They know that those guys weren't BC, at least not then they weren't BC. Carrying, they were working, and we all saw them working in the rice paddy. And the one guy with a hole ran in, the other guy had nothing. And I couldn't call fire mission in on that village. I said, I knew those people in there and told them how it was in February when I was there. And I said, I just couldn't do it. He said, is this going to become a problem for me? I said, in what way, sir? He says, is it going to happen again? I said, if you tell me to put fire on innocent civilians, yes, it will happen. But if that target is firing at you, there'll be no problem. So he said, very well. He said, then, you're excused. And he said, tomorrow morning we'll be sweeping. We're going on a 2-company sweep into the Funans and what was the other place? La Sape. It's one is east of or west of Liberty Road. The other one's east of Liberty Road. And I think Golf Company joined us from Anwa. And we left Lock 6 a platoon short because somebody had to man Lock 6 while we were going. And so we went out, and from that point on, it was Anwa had changed so much when I was gone. From actually started in August, but August, September, and October, it was an insane place to be. The booby traps. I had to go back, and I'm kind of glad we didn't get together because I wanted to read the after action reports and the command chronologies, and I just read it for October. July and August are about that thick. The paper's about that thick. And the one for October is about that thick, the command chronology. And I just started reading. Marine trips booby trap, WIA, 3 Marines killed, 250-pound box mine. And that went on for the entire month of October. And, I don't remember that, all those booby traps in that. In October, October was a month of pretty much fighting the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese unit. They were small unit actions, most of them, and we had companies out all the time. I mean, before it wasn't like that. Platoon patrols, even squad patrols, not far away from An Wall, just enough because we were starting to get hit from the villages out to the north of us, which was very, very, very rare. And matter of fact, that fire mission where I fired the airburst, that was that village right out in front of us, and that was in October. So October was a month of 2-5 being extremely aggressive, and taking a lot of booby trap casualties, finding a lot of caches, weapon caches in the villages. And so it was, I mean, that's the way it was when that's the way it was starting to get when I got back in late August. September, of course, was a little different, but we still had booby traps, but we had a lot of operations going on too. Swift. Then I went on ballistic charge, and when I came back, I went on R&R. But when I got back on October the 3rd and went through all those booby traps and stuff like that, it was pretty bad. I mean,
you and I have talked about this, just speaking of the fighting and the booby traps, but I mean, from April until really even arguably with Operation Essex and even Auburn in November and December. From April to December of 67, the 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines are in some of the toughest fighting of the war.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
just constant fighting of NVA units, hard cracked units, regular troops, well-disciplined Viet Cong units, constant booby traps. I mean,
not,
it's the hottest area to be in 1967.
yeah. I agree. I don't disagree with that, because it was something was always happening in Quang Nam province, Anwar Basin, and we had trying to think what I was going to say. I even did patrols, or I did, once we went to Hoi An to relieve the I believe the 1st Battalion, 1st Marines, why they went out on an op. Two of their companies were going out on an op, and they also manned an outpost, so they had one company behind, so they sent us. Echo Company went with Golf Company. And the reason I know it's Golf Company is because I trained the FO, who was Gary Young. He was the FO for Golf Company. So we took over their lines. And that was beginning to happen a lot. We actually went on an op with the 7th Marines. It was under the control of the 7th Marines. So the op doesn't even show up in 2-5's command chronologies, because the operation belonged to 2-7. So 2-7 is the one who made out the command chronology and the after action report, and the operational reports actually too, they made out. So and there's quite a few of those where I don't believe ballistic charge. I think I had to send away, because I know I have it. But ballistic charge, as far as I know, no, there's no 2-5, because there's no 2-5 command chronology, because we were under the command of the 1st Marines during that op. So, and I was reading a lot of those things in the after action report, and there is so much stuff left out. I mean, all the details left out. They don't tell you anything other than Marine tripped a booby trap, or this unit took 15 rounds sniper fire, returned the fire. And to me, they're notorious for what they don't say. I got these only to verify dates and to read things that happened on those dates, and I didn't really learn very much more reading them. That as far as our battalion's concerned.
Well, reading, for people who haven't read after action reports, I mean, I'll even throw up an example of one from September, but they're very cut and dry. There is no, it's very impersonal. There is no mention of names. It talks, there's statistics, there's numbers. For example, this shows court-martial numbers and non-judicial punishments carried out by battalions and company commanders, but the information here is lackluster. Even when it does come to the combat, it'll just be, as you said, 2 Marines were killed in action, 7 were wounded, but there's no names, there's no mention of any acts of valor or heroism by the Marines itself. It's bland. And you're right.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
and in the opinion of this historian, a lot of the information that's left out is valuable information that is lost to
Yeah.
history that we will not
Yeah.
get of what truly was happening in the country, but it's left out for admin or because it doesn't fit the narrative that the battalion's trying to push at the time.
Exactly. And I read when I started reading these, I read August because I wanted to see what they had put about the ambush on Liberty Road where Lieutenant Bertolozzi was killed, and it was exactly the same. They didn't even make mention to the fact that he was the executive officer of Echo Company. It was so impersonal, and it is what we were, numbers. That's all it is. It's just so generic and so impersonal. And tell you the truth, I was up 3 hours last night reading them. I stopped October, and then I couldn't resist because November was Operation Essex, and I read everything on Operation Essex exactly the same way. And with Waste City, I went into Waste City because I have it for that too, and it's a thick file. I mean, I don't know who prepared that one, but again, it's generic, and that file doesn't say anything at all about Echo Company. Echo was the only company. We were the only company that didn't go into Waste City because we were down south, pretty much patrolling the area. The entire battalion was patrolling before they went into Waste City. I talked, and I don't know if I told you this, but I talked to Ernie Cheatham back in the 1990s when he was a lieutenant general. Ron Christmas was the commander of I think the 1st Marine Expeditionary Brigade at Camp Pendleton. And my daughter and I went to the anniversary of the 1st Marine Division, and they had a really big deal, beach landings with these new, airboats and planes and jets flying over, and really good company size weapons demonstrations, and it was just a great time. And I ran into I think I told you I ran into Captain Christmas's wife, and she took down my name and everything, and he wrote me a letter. But General Cheatham told me, because I asked him, I said, because he actually invited me to have lunch with him, and I wasn't going to turn that down. We ate in the general's mess for the general officers, and I said, sir, I said, I've always wanted to ask somebody, either you or even my company commander, Captain Duffy. I've never been able to find him, or Captain Christmas. And I said, why was Echo Company left out of the biggest battle 2-5 fought during that war? And I said, you would think they would be happy about it, but they were angry. They were angry that they did not get to go into Waste City and fight. And he said, and this is what he told me, whether he was blowing smoke, he said, I did it because I needed my best company down at the from Troy Bridge down to Fulak Valley. And I just looked at him and I said, thank you for sharing that for me, sir. And I shared it with some of my buddies, and he said, he's just blowing smoke up your butt. So I don't know if that's true. We were a good company, and we lost a lot of guys. I went into Waste City for a short period. And I only went because I was requested to go, because Captain Christmas didn't want to go into Waste City without his 81 FO. Well, Ron, his 81 FO was another one of my best buddies, Ron DeFore, and Ron was on his way back from R&R, but he wasn't there. And I asked Captain Duffy, why does he need me? He said, it's only going to be for a few days. You're going to go in there and just mop up some NBA that attacked the city. And so at that time, Ron, my radio operator, we got separated. Somebody came in and stole my radio operator, and I never saw him again before I left Vietnam. But don't let me lose my train of thought here. But so I just asked him, and the thing is, there's no after action reports about any of it. You won't find an after action report of anything Echo Company did down at the Troy Bridge in Phu Loc Valley. Nothing. And I've looked. I've begged for the people at the historical center to look. There's got to be something. They only kept everything that happened in Way City. So, and we fought some pretty heavy battles down there. We were fighting heavy battles before Way. I mean, before Way, every company was just about fighting every day along. We were all lined up along Highway 1 from the Troy Bridge all the way to Phu Loc Valley. We were at the Phu Loc Valley Echo, and we were in the mouth of Phu Loc Valley, and I believe we had 681 mortars there. Matter of fact, I know we had 86 because I checked my diary and they were all there. But when Tet started, everything changed, and so I don't know if he was. I did finally find Pete Duffy, but he was working at a bank in New York and he had died, so I was not able to speak to him. But I wrote a letter to his home, and his wife wrote me back, and so I would have loved to have gotten in touch with him, but.
Well, and for people who will watch this is a photograph that I grabbed of Big Ernie Cheatham in Way City, and pretty famous photograph. It appears in some books in itself. But speaking on Echo Company's involvement, I mean, you were fighting some pretty intense fights, especially in January and February, because you have one company responsible for a battalion TAOR, because 3 other line companies are in Way City fighting it out.
Yeah. And, that's somebody told me that one of my friends told me that was in hotel that Captain Christmas had made the statement that because everybody knew Echo didn't come, and somebody asked him about that, and he said, he said poor it was Lieutenant was it Lieutenant Poland? No, it wasn't Lieutenant Poland. But anyway, he said, poor Echo Company. He said they're down there doing that, taking care of that entire area of AO, or the area of responsibility that the battalion had before Way. And but we wanted to be in Way. We didn't want to be there. I mean, that should have been the battalion that went in, and he wanted. It wasn't that he kept us out. He had orders. He had to protect that. He had to protect the Troy River Bridge. I mean, that was the overland route to get supplies in at that time of the year. And air cover can be, because of the fog and the low clouds, getting air cover in there is pretty tough. And I understand they even probably had trouble in Way City at times. But Echo Company wanted to be there in the worst way, but they didn't have it easy down there. I can tell you that. After I went into Way I went in twice. I went in once, and when I got there, I don't want to share that now. Let's get to that when we come to Way. But they were, let's just say they were involved down there. I mean, one of my other buddies, he was ambushed at the Troy River Bridge. NVA ambushed they took a squad into a village below Troy River Bridge, and they had a guy named I won't say his name. I don't know if he's still alive, but let's just say Blowhard. But Blowhard had the rear in the squad patrol. He brought up rear security. He was to watch the rear, and he's diddy bopping around, and of course they walked. They were walking down a trail through a village. They came through the village and out of the village, and when they got no more than probably 30, 40 yards out, NVA opened up on them, and he got left behind. The other ones, they ran. They were outgunned, and nobody really know who got hit until they got back to the Troy River Bridge. But there were a couple dead, and one of the wounded was Tom McLaughlin, Corporal McLaughlin. He was a squad leader, and he got hit in the leg multiple times with AK-47 fire, and tore his leg off. I mean, his leg was just hanging by strings, by sinew and ligament, and so they wanted to go back. I mean, the squad didn't know that Mac had been left behind, and so they took a platoon back there this time, and they were able to get him. And when they brought him back, the people in the village where we were at Troy River Bridge, when they brought him back, the people were all laughing and pointing at Tom McLaughlin and the dead that we brought in and everything, and sneering. And that's the closest I ever seen Marines come to, flipping off their safeties on their M16s and mowing people down. I mean, it was one of those times when, we're here fighting for you, and you laugh at our wounded and dead. But Mac made it. He came to my house in 86 or 87, and we visited, and we offered him a place to stay, but he was very conscious about his prosthesis. He didn't want people to see him with it, and so he flew military in because he was able to fly because of his 100% disability, permanent and total, and he was able to fly. So he came in. He actually the plane landed at Long Beach Airport, and I picked him up, brought him to his hotel, and then we basically just talked about what was going on, talked about Way City, and both of us still angry, wondering why we didn't get to go in. And I said, well, we had a pretty tough time. We weren't playing cards all day long, and there were patrols every day, and we were taking casualties every day, and so. But I can talk more about that when we get to it.
Well, and I wanted to pull up a picture. You've mentioned your radio operator pretty often, and I wanted to show one of the pictures that I found on your Together We Serve page of your radio operator. That way, the viewers, we can get a visual of the RTO and Mike Harris.
That's him.
Now, per your statement, he was the best RTO in all of Vietnam.
Of every one I ever saw, I couldn't but I would put him up there with the best.
And what made him so talented? What made him so valuable?
Oh, he was smart to begin with. He had a great memory. A lot of radio operators, when you give them the coordinates, they would mess it up. I found that early on, and then they got around where they'd carry a tablet or do something like that, and that's taking valuable time. I needed somebody that when I told him the coordinates, he could relay it immediately and not mess it up. And then he was good on the radio. He was exceptionally good on the radio and making contact with the mortar, with the mortar unit or artillery, whichever one we were using. And I don't know, we just jived. He just knew me. He knew how I operated. He knew what was going to happen the second we got hit. It didn't matter where we were. It didn't matter if it was a sniper round. I would always drop my M16, grab my map, and looking for the target. looking for a target, looking for the grunts to tell me where that sniper round come from, that tree line right there. And I'd look at the skipper and he'd say, go for it. Or, no, we're not gonna fire on one sniper. So, which was very, very seldom the case. If, we had good officers, if they could kill a sniper, they would. But he could do all those things, and he could do them. I mean, fluently. I never had to. I don't remember ever having to correct him, because I would tell him 9, 8, 7, 3, 6, 2, and he would go 9, 8, 7, 3, 6, 2, and then he'd go whiskey one. This is 1 Alpha. I have a fire mission for you. And they go, Roger, send it 987-362 right off the bat. And I always listened, because I didn't want him to make a mistake. Because that would be a reflection on both of us, and we'd be relieved immediately. They didn't put up with short rounds, long rounds, or friendly fire. I think that was it. And I think we weren't so much best friends. We were good friends. He wasn't like Ron DeFore or Danny Reesberg or some of the other ones, but on a personal level, we just jived together. And I found him. I didn't find him. I was at the dentist. The VA sent me to see a dentist outside in Florida. And excuse me for a second. Oh, I'm sorry. With my dog. But I bumped into a guy from our vet group at the vet center, and we talked. And he goes, "Hey man," he said, there's a guy in there who identified your picture on the picture you have on the wall in the vet center with you and your radio operator." And I go, "What's his name?" And he said, Ron DeFore, or he said, Ron Hamlin. I said, "No." I said, "I've been looking for him. How many years I've been looking for him. It can't be him." And he said, "No, it's him." And he said that our counselor, he said, "Call him. He'll tell you." So I called Ian, and I said, "Ian, what can you tell me about Ron Hamlin?" He said, "Yeah, he came in here for his personal counseling for PTSD, and we walked out of the room, and your picture there that you took, that one you have right there." And he said, "Hey, there's Mike." And from there, I said, "Well, I got to meet him." I said, he said, "Well, he's here. He does volunteer work at the vet center." And so I said, "Well, give me a day and I'll be there." And so he gave me a day, and I went over there and I parked, and I was apprehensive at first and didn't know what to think. And Ian said, "There he is." They were looking out the window. I didn't see him, but they saw me. And he goes, "Yep, that's just exactly how I remember Thumper." And he says, "Go meet him." He said, "Don't wait for him to come. Go meet him." And so we met in the parking lot. And but he died that year. That same year he died of COVID, killed him. So that was pretty bad. We didn't get caught up. He was in a bad way, PTSD. He forgot everything. He did not remember anything. He remembered me, but as far as battles and names, I tried to help him and refresh him. And Operation Auburn was both a traumatic, in December was a traumatic time for both of us. When we get to it, I'll tell the story, but he didn't even remember it. And a sniper shot his prick 25 radio whip antenna off. And so we got, we had 5 or 6 months together. And then he came down sick, and nobody notified me that he had gotten sick, and I let it go by too long before contacting him. So I went in one day for my counseling, and he said, "Yeah," he says, Ron's in the hospital and he's got COVID. And I said, well, you got to keep me informed what's going on with him. I said, I'll go, where's he at? And he said, they won't let anybody in the room. And I said, well, you keep me abreast of everything. So I called him on the phone. I did a telehealth this one week because I wasn't in Wellington. I was up at my daughter's at Tampa. And so I returned his call. He left me a message on my phone. And I returned his call and I said, what's up, Ian? And he said, I just wanted to let you know you have a appointment when you get back. And I said, yeah, and I don't remember the date, and I repeated it back to him. And I said, how's my old buddy doing? And he said, nobody called you? I said, about what? And he said, well, he said he died of COVID 2 months ago. And, you know, he goes, nobody called you? And I said, no, nobody called me. He could tell by my reaction I wasn't very happy with it. And I said, well, I got to let you go because we're leaving. And we were. And when I got back, I went over and asked him, where's he buried? He's buried at the West Palm Beach National Cemetery there. And I went over and visited him because we were in the process of moving to South Carolina. And I went over and I went over to pay him a visit before I left. And I wish I could have spent more time with him and helped him, and because he helped me just seeing him. I didn't know what happened. I knew he didn't die because I had that green book that has all the casualties in it. That's how I found out a lot of my buddies died. And after I came home, but I would have loved to have had a couple more years with him. But it happens. Life happens, and you got to move on from that. And
Well,
I got to meet his family though, which was nice, and then I keep in contact with him every once in a while. And he did a real book. He had a book he made of everything he had in Vietnam, which wasn't much. And the one picture he had was that same picture that you took. He always had a camera around his neck. When we weren't in combat, we were on patrol. He always wore. Matter of fact, I'll send you the picture because I got a picture of that around his neck. And a lot of the pictures I got, he took with that camera, and he would get them developed, and then he would get 2 copies, and he always gave me copies of them. So just so you know, a lot of the photos, that photo right there was taken by somebody else at Fulop 6. But so.
Well, and you doing this, you and I conversing, building a friendship, but telling your story, in many ways, you're keeping Ron Hamlin's legacy alive by sharing the connections and what you guys did together, good and bad. And that's why for today, one of the things I wanted to talk about was some of the photographs you sent me of who these Marines are and just what's going on in some of these pictures here.
That one is, of course, that's me on the left. That was the day before I got wounded at Mylock 2. On the screen to my right is he's the platoon sergeant for Lieutenant Fuller's company. We told a story about him killed at Newcastle, won the Navy Cross. Trying to remember his name, Gunny Carter, Staff Sergeant Carter. And that's TJ Jones. We called him TJ. He's from Philadelphia. And that's Sandy, Sandy Johnson. He was a member of the mortar squad. Both of them were members of the first mortar squad. I was there to learn from them what they do on the guns. And I actually, during the time there, won the position of assistant gunner on the 81 mortar. Even though I wasn't going to be there long, at least I didn't think I would. I ended up being there a lot longer than I wanted to. But I ended up being the assistant gunner, and that's when Sergeant Wilson and Sergeant Willingham, they're the ones who I told you about. They wrote the Purple Heart Medal, and that's how I got that. They also wrote me up for a meritorious promotion to Lance Corporal. So, there were good things that were happening to me during that period of time. And these four guys, especially the platoon sergeant from Echo, First Platoon, he was the funniest guy. He always making people laugh, and but he was tough as nails when with the guys in Echo Company. So they all good guys.
Well, and for the viewers here, what are you guys leaning on and sitting on?
That's the 81 mortar gun pit. Usually they take the extra ammo boxes when we get the mortars out of them. They use them to make bunkers out of. And this one here, that day we were putting sandbags on the top of it, and eventually from the bottom up. They just make that to protect the guys in the gun pit. And that's where on the night of February 20, well, it was actually the morning of February 27th, when we got hit by the 3 RPGs. That was the bunker I was diving into when the RPG hit behind me and knocked me head over heels and knocked me unconscious. And that's what that is, though. To my left there is the ammo is kept inside a small, it's I'd say an 8x8 square bunker that keeps the ammo. And then when they have a fire mission, the ammo is already there, and the gunner's putting the information on the site, and he's getting it transmitted to him by the FDC, and he puts it on the gun, and then the assistant gunner drops the rounds down the tube, and these 2 ammo guys are handing them around, and he's dropping them down. Also, when he gets the information from the FDC, they will translate it, and they will tell you all the information, elevation, deflection, how many of the increments to take off the mortar, the gunpowder. And and then that's the assistant gunner's job. If you only need 6 instruments on an HE, you take 2 off. Always on the opposite end, though. If you take them off on the same end, it'll cause that thing to wobble.
I'm sure that's a sight through the air.
Yeah, you don't want a wobbling mortar around, because the range will be affected, and a lot of bad things could happen with that. So I did that, and then intermittent. Every time I would go with Gordon Wilson, and then come back and go back with the mortar platoon when Gordon went out. And then I went out on Operation Arizona with Sergeant Lackey. I just learned from all these guys: Sergeant Lackey, Sergeant Wheeler, Sergeant Wilson. All were forward observers up at Contienne before they came down, and saw a lot of action up there. And they transmitted so much of their knowledge and experience to me. And I think I was probably fortunate, because the FOs that I trained, I pretty much trained them all after these guys left. And I was also doing school. When we were back at Anwell, they would bring in squad leaders, and anybody that wanted to attend the FO procedure class, and I would teach that when I was back at Anwell. And with the squad leaders coming in, of course, some of them, they're cocky, and they can do it just as good as you can. And and I was always polite. Yes, I'm sure you can, but remember, you have a squad to take care of. What's going to happen if you're calling in a mission and your skipper calls you and said he wants you to move your squad? Then you're stuck. That's why I'm here. So, but it was, it was good.
Well, and I've heard a lot of guys, and I'm going to pull up this other picture here. It's kind of blurry, but I've heard a lot of Marines refer to it as the best, but the worst times of their life as well.
Yeah. With all these guys, that's That's Johnson on the left. Remember told you about the camera over his deal? That's
Yep.
Ron. That's Junior in the middle, and then me. And who is that? I can't see who that is. Is that Foster? Yeah, that's Foster, Corporal Foster. They're all members of the 81 Mortar Platoon. We ran into each other. This was south of Way, um, I'd say about a week before Tet started. But these guys were all good mortarmen. I mean, they didn't get a lot of training at Camp Pendleton, because the Marine Corps didn't have time to do the training, because boot camp, I think, was 16 weeks at the time, before boot camp broke out. I mean, before the war broke out. So they cut it down to, I mean, I think I had 21 or 22 days, so they didn't have any more than that. And then they're asking them to go to Vietnam and drop these high explosives, and they were good guys. They were all of them. I never ran across anybody who couldn't do the job and didn't do their job.
Well, it brings up a question I have, that, outside of the fact that these Marines did their jobs and did what they were supposed to do, you refer to some of these guys with nicknames. You yourself is called Thumper. The guy here in the middle is called Junior. So did everybody have a nickname?
No, no, no. Most of the guys I knew in 81 Mortars didn't have nicknames. I mean, I got mine because of some guys in Echo Company, when I was firing a mission one time, and it was a close mission. It was from Fulak 6, and we were only 1,200 meters away, and well within range of the mortars, and they dropping the mortar rounds down the tube, and one guy just said, "Listen to that thump, thump, thump," and then when it hit, it's like crunch, 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 and so he said, "For now, I'm gonna call you Thumper," and that's how the name took. And Ron, he didn't call me Thumper. My other friend, Ron DeFore, Ron called me Mo. My initials, Michael Olin Harris. He just called me Mo. And so I had two names. In the mortar platoon, I was Mo, and in the Echo Company, I was Thumper. So I guess I was lucky.
Well, I've definitely heard a lot worse nicknames for Marines in this time period. Well, in this next photograph is one of my favorites that you've sent me, of just young Marines having fun.
Yeah, both of them should know better than to have that kind of fun. Yeah, those are two guys from the mortar platoon. The one guy standing, we called him Elvis. And I don't remember the guy sitting. I should know his name, because he was the ammo sergeant of one of the sections, the Marine sections, just fooling around with a 81 mortar, and they did that stuff all the time. You got another guy that's there at the same pictures I took. He's got, let's see, how did he do that? Oh, he's got a grenade hanging out of his mouth. Another guy's got a grenade in his hand, and he's holding the pin. Dumb things like that. The Marine got wounded doing that, by the way.
Jesus.
They used to sit after Nansang got overrun. They used to sit at nighttime when the H&Is would be fired. That I would plot H&Is for the enemy's routes of progress to our site, and just to keep them honest, keep them guessing. And but after it got overran, it became throwing grenades off the side just in case the enemy's thinking of coming up that same way again. How they got up to begin with, nobody knows, but they did, and they were just play a game. Who can hold a pin, let the spoon fly, and who can hold on it the longest before they throw it. And there were some really close calls, and one of the close calls was a guy who threw it and they're thrown downhill through it. His hand was up when the grenade went off, and he got shrapnel into his hand, and he got court-martialed. So, because Colonel, who was that? It would have been Colonel McNaughton, who was our colonel at the time. He didn't go around for that foolish stuff.
Well, and in many ways, some people might think that you would get even if it was a wound like this, but a Purple Heart. But no, when it's self-inflicted, that is a court-martial offense.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he didn't get no Purple Heart. He was a corporal at the time. He was, matter of fact, he was one of the 81 FO or the 81 radio operators on the other end, not the FO end, the one that answers the phones on the other end. He was a corporal, and he was busted to lance corporal. Probably would have busted him to private if he could, but in the Marine Corps you can only be busted one rank. But oh, there they are. There were my buddies from. Yeah, that was from the village just outside Antenna Valley. Um, we were we were actually just stopped in that village for the day, and Doc was treating some of the kids that had cuts and bruises and sick, and I ran into these two cuties.
Was it a joy to see the kids and watch the kids come up to you?
I love the kids. I love the kids, and they're the ones that suffered. I mean, we all suffered. Anybody was there that suffered, but the kids, they didn't deserve. And I don't think I told the story. I withheld it. I don't know why, but I'll tell it now because it happened in February when I was running convoy security back and forth from Fulak 6 to Anwal. I was at Anwal, but running supplies back and forth, 2 trips. On the second trip back we came out of Mylock 2, we dropped their supplies off, and we came out of Mylock 2, and we were going, if you could see the map, actually, I have the map right here. I probably couldn't even see it on there. No, you wouldn't be able to.
Oh, yeah, we can see it a little bit.
Can you?
Yeah.
You can see the bend in the road there. Anwal is down here.
Yep,
can you
there's
see it?
Anwal.
Okay, and then you go, this is Liberty, you can see Liberty Bridge, or Liberty Road. Liberty Road is going from Anwal over here. You had to come out the gate here and go up the road. But when you got up here, that road was drawn in. And because there was no road when they took the picture that made the map, there was no road there. And I guess they weren't expecting to have a road being necessary there, but they did because of the mine sweeps and everything. So it goes, if you look at it, it goes right to Fulak 6. Can you
and
see
now, is
it
that
there?
where these kids lived, was in Fulak 6?
Yeah, no, the kids not these kids, they were in a village, one outside Antenna Valley.
Okay.
These were different kids. They were en route from Anwal to Fulak 6, and I'd been in country, I think, 6 days at that time, 5 or 6 days, and we took sniper fire it would have been off to the east from a couple of villages, not so much the villages as the tree lines. And so we all jumped down, and everybody started shooting with their M14s, and I wasn't underneath. I was at the front of the truck in the prone position, using the tire for cover, and at the same time firing my weapon. And then all of a sudden, the staff sergeant, who was the NCO in charge of that patrol, you would call it, he kept yelling, screaming, "Cease fire! Cease fire! Cease fire!" And he said, "I think you shot kids." All I saw was what I was told when I was in boot camp, what I was told in ITR, the enemy wears black pajamas, white pajamas, khaki pajamas. And so I saw 3 kids with black pajamas running. And I noticed everybody else was shooting in a different position, but I was shooting at them. And so, of course, we ran out there. The staff sergeant ran out there and he looked and went down. And the 3 kids were all 3 down. And one was hit in the shoulder, one was hit in the leg, and the other one had a hand shot in the hand. It was called it a superficial wound. And the girl that got hit in the shoulder was the worst. And so he called in a medevac. We medevaced all 3 of them. And then the girl died en route. And I knew I shot him. I mean, there was nobody shooting that direction. And he said, "Who shot them?" The sergeant asked. And I said, "It was me, Sergeant." And he said, "What the hell were you thinking of?" I said, "All I saw was black pajamas running. You know, they're 500, 600, 700 meters out. I fired my rifle pretty good in boot camp." I said it was pretty good. I didn't kill him right there, but the girl died en route to Da Nang, First Med Battalion, and so of course they had to file a report, and I had to go before the inquiry, and I just told them, and the guy, you know, to make a long story short, it went down as an accidental shooting, and the captain and the gunny told me, he said, they got to stop telling these people back in the States that the enemy wears black pajamas. They wear black, they wear white, they wear khaki, they also wear green. They wear his exact quote, they wear any damn thing they can find. And so it was ruled accidental. And the gunny, the captain goes, it won't go down in your record. And I looked at him and I said, how about this record right here? I said, there's not a day that has gone by since I've been home from Vietnam where I haven't thought of those 3 kids, and I probably think of them until the day I die. But I know in my heart it was an accident. I didn't mean to shoot kids. I was shooting the enemy as far as I could tell. On that 700 yards, it's just hard to tell. So so that, that those kind of things happened. And so you can go on where you were, bud.
Well, I think just as I've talked to you prior, I think this is a good little break for us to take and a pause here. But before we take our break, I mean,
okay,
you are the only person, Marine, I should specify. You're the only Marine, only combat veteran that I've interviewed that is admitted to something like this. A lot of Marines and Army guys that were there that I've talked to alluded to it or talk about witnessing it, but you're the only person to say that you had a part in something like that. And when we get back, I want to, if you would be open to it, Mike, talk about the impact that you think it's had on you since then. I mean, you're a father yourself, now after from Vietnam, and of course you're a grandfather. How does this impact you? And for there, we're going to take our break here, Mike. That was something else. Well, Mike, and picking up where we just left off with a short little break there of this incident on your 3rd day in country, as a father and a grandfather now, how do you think that that's affected you over the years?
Well, you think about it a lot because you have children yourself, and anything can happen to them. They could be out at the mall or with us or something like that, and you have a crazy person come in and shoot because it's so unexpected. But I think I treat kids a lot better than I did when I went in. Of course, I was young, but I used to like to pick on kids. Not bad stuff, but because life is short, and sometimes it's shorter for others. So I don't know. I've really never even thought about that question. I know the kids were, I mean, I, I drove a Sunday school bus for so long and I picked up kids, young kids. And um, for most of my time at that one church I was at, I had kids just falling all over me. I mean, they were young, impressionable. Some of them, their fathers weren't at home, and they come from broken homes, and um, but I just loved on them, and I feel that way today. I think it made me a better father. Um, um, but other than that, it just, I guess it's just the shortness of life. What can happen in a given instant? Like these poor kids, they were just out in the rice paddy, probably working, doing something for mom and dad, and the next thing they know, one's dead, and two are wounded, and um, but it's just like I told him when I did it, and I stood before the inquiry, and he said I had been cleared, and I said, how do you clear it from this record here? And I remember what he told me. He said, you just move on. Otherwise, you'll go home in a body bag. But I think I've learned I think I have more of an affection for kids now. I mean, my grandson here, he plays with young people, and this one little girl comes from a broken home, and her mother doesn't want to see her, and she's not like 8 years old. She just turned 8 yesterday, and I just can't understand that. And but it bothered me for a long time. Um, and I don't say it probably bothers me even today when I think of it, because I wouldn't have, withheld it. I mean, I wasn't going to tell anybody, but you got to tell them the truth, because war is not a clean and a pristine um, thing that happens. There's a lot of bad things that happen, and it's some within your control, some out of your control, but so I think that's about all I can say.
Well, I think that's a phenomenal answer, and a way to respond to it is how you've tried to turn this into something positive now, the impact that you've had. And with that, from the story that you had about Ken and the stories that you've told me in itself, I mean, it's all about how you try to move on and make the best of the situation you possibly can.
Yeah, you have to. I
Well,
learned that very early in life. I said when I came home, I didn't want I didn't want a girlfriend. I certainly didn't want to have a fiance and get married. I just wanted to be left alone. I just wanted to get better, and um, but I got a girlfriend, a fiance, and a wife, and rather like 8 months after coming home. But she's been good for me. I mean, she listened to me. The only one who ever really listened to me when I talked about Vietnam. My own family, my my mom and them, they just didn't want to hear it. I guess maybe because it was so negative for the country, and I don't know why, but I for a long time had a story to tell, and nobody listened. And thank goodness my wife did. My kids got interested finally, because they see what PTSD can do to a person. And I wrote my journal. I have my journal, and I wrote a book from the journal, and they read it. And so, so that, I think that's about all I'll say about that.
well, and I think you do have a very important story to tell, a unique one to tell, considering the places that you went to, the combat operations you participated in, but the moral story that you've tried to tell and the effect it's had on you. I mean, this is a rare glimpse that we are getting into what life was like in Vietnam for a Marine in
Yeah.
67. And that's why I brought up this photograph. I mean, this is a daily occurrence of what the average daily life was like of Marines, I assume, out on a patrol and taking a short rest.
That's Operation Essex, actually. That was taken Yeah, that was taken by Ron during Operation Essex. And Echo Company was assigned to guard the headquarters section because Colonel McNaughton, the battalion commander, went out on the operation. And so they sent one platoon of Echo to Lieutenant Mike Long's platoon went. And of course, he said, he told our company commander, I want Thumper to go with me. Um, so we just protected the headquarters company. Last 2 or 3 days of Essex, we got into some battles because we left the hill and joined the fight down there. And because there was a lot of casualties during Essex, and a lot of companies were short of people, so we got loaned out, and that was fine with me. You know, I never shirked my duty. I never said hope something would happen so I wouldn't have to go. I just wanted to do what I could do and see if I couldn't come home alive.
Well, and that's
But
the
that's what.
story of
Go
hundreds of
ahead.
thousands of combat vets in Vietnam of just
Mhm.
doing their job so they could come home.
And sometimes you do jobs and they give you medals. I mean, that's something I don't ever understand. But maybe the Israelis do it right. They don't give a medal at all. They all their soldiers they're the same, and they treat them the same, and so they don't have a Medal of Honor and a Navy Cross and things like that. I'm not saying that's a negative thing because it's not. Um, my stepdad was in World War II. Well, he was decorated, um, and so I don't have anything against that, but there's a lot of guys who get passed over that too. I could name guys who should be walking around with uh, with medals, but they just didn't get noticed. And maybe that's the key to it. You're conspicuous. Um, I think the Silver Star is for conspicuous gallantry, and I guess a lot of people notice. So
Well, and it brings up a point too that you're right. There's a lot of people who should have gotten awarded for things that they did in Vietnam. And sometimes the paperwork was there and it got lost, or the officer who
mhm.
witnessed it was killed, a few days later. But
Yeah, yep,
we didn't get this on recording last time, but you made the statement when we finished everything up that, you weren't doing this for America. You were doing this for the guys beside of you, for the Marines,
exactly.
fighting holes to your left and right.
Yeah, I that might be a cliche. I might have heard World War II guys say it, but those guys were actually fighting for the world, But um, we were, I mean, we most of us were young, impressionable, naive, young 18-year-olds like me when they got to Vietnam, and they had so many misconceptions of what it was going to be like in combat and in a lot of other things. I was one of them. And one thing I learned right away is that don't count on the South Vietnamese people because they're not in it with you. Um, and I didn't learn that by myself. I mean, Corporal Reesberg, Danny Reesberg, my good buddy, he told me that. I remember the one time when it was when I shot those kids, um, and it was bothering me. I mean, for weeks after it was bothering me. And he just told me, he said, your job here is simple. It's to make it through this war and get home to your family. He said, you're not going to do anything to help these people. They don't care. He says, you've already witnessed that. What happens when you run into a village and you use the past and booby traps are going off, killing Marines, wounded Marines every single day. And that couldn't happen if the people were on our side or were on our side. But you have to understand the pressure they're under. They help us, they get killed. They don't help us, they get their villages burned down. They're between a rock and a hard place. And I recognize that. But I also recognize village after village after village after village that I went through in Vietnam, whether I was in the An Wall, Hoi An, or if I was up in Phu Bai area of operations. You go into a hooch, eventually you find a picture of Ho Chi Minh hanging on the wall. And I would say it was even more so in the An Wall Basin. I mean, I don't know. I can't tell you how many pictures of Ho Chi Minh I saw, but I saw quite a few.
Well, and with that, I mean, just speaking in this regard, even in the villages, in some of them, as you know, you can't trust the villagers per se because you don't know who's Viet Cong, but
Yeah,
you also can't just start rounding them up and shooting them either because
exactly.
you don't have the proof. That obviously is going to create further tensions, and that's not what you're there to do. And
No.
so at the same time, the Marines are in a rock and a hard place too.
Yeah, both were. I mean, there's no doubt about that. Um, Vietnamization was a good policy, but it was ineffectual and could never have worked under any condition because too many of the people were pro Ho Chi Minh. They weren't probably necessary pro communist. I don't even think they knew what a communist was, but they loved Ho Chi Minh. I mean, he's the George Washington of Vietnam, and he was revered by both North and South. But they had an opportunity to retain their freedom, and they chose to turn a different direction. Of course, we had a little bit to do with that. Um, the South Vietnamese army, when we left, or at least when I left, was more than capable of dealing with the NBA, more than capable, and especially the Ranger units. And they had some South Vietnamese Marines, and the Army were better trained, and they proved it during 1972 in the Easter Offensive up north in the DMZ. And Easter Offensive, they handed the North Vietnamese soldiers their lunch. And but when you walk away from that and you just throw your hands up and say, "We're done," that's fine, because the country was being torn apart. But to tell the South Vietnamese government and their army, by the way, we're not gonna keep our word and trade off, one for one. That's what we agreed to do with them. You lose a tank, we give you a tank. You lose 10 tanks, we'll give you 10 tanks. You shoot 1,000,000 rounds, we'll give you 1,000,000 rounds. And we didn't hold that. And people criticize the South Vietnamese army for running in 75, but what are you going to do? You got nothing to shoot at them. You can stand by and throw rocks and get shot. So it was a hard situation in both ways for everybody. And I'm not sorry I went. I learned a lot of valuable lessons, um, some good, some bad, um, but my main purpose when I went out in the field was to protect the Marines that were in that company. It was my job to call in the fire as quickly and accurately as I could, um, keep the enemy off balance, and while the Marines maneuver to kill them, and so I did the best job I could do, and um, I think I did a pretty good job too. I don't know anybody that would speak out against it today or against me.
Well, to bring it up, speaking of the job that you did, and chronologically with our timeline of where we have went with your interviews, in
Mhm.
September, Echo Company is OpCon to 1-1, and you
Mhm.
participate in Operation Ballistic Charge. And
Sure.
through that, you were awarded a Valor Award for what you did in that operation. Do you mind going into that, Mike?
The operation,
Yes, sir.
yeah, we on 13 September 1967, we were alerted to a possible operation with 1-1 in Hoi An, and I went to the briefing. I was called to the briefing with Captain Kinder, and he just alerted us. And then the next day, he confirmed that there would be an operation. We would be working with elements of 1-1 and 2-1. We were on the 15th of September. We were to fly into 1-1's base camp at Hoi An, and then on the 16th, the morning of the 16th, we would kick off D-Day. I think it was at around 0630 or 0700, somewhere in that area. And so we got to Hoi An. We met the various people. I went to the briefing because the 1st Battalion, 1st Marines battalion commander had operational control of Operation Ballistic Charge, and I listened to what he had to say, and then of course we went back, and Captain Kinder got the companies together, explained, at least had their officers explain what we were going to be doing. Basically, we were going to be a set up a blocking position for 1-1, and the operation would begin on the morning of the 16th with a transport by Amtrak from 1-1's base camp down to the river. I don't remember the name of the river, and I never operated in that area, so I had to really familiarize myself the night before. And I seen the areas that we were going to operate in, and it was, Amtrak's would be with us the whole time, because we would go from one island to another island to another island. And so on the 16th, we had chow, a nice good meal at the mess hall there at 1-1, and we began to board the Amtraks. I think there were about 12 of them to haul our company down for the river crossing. And we got underway, and we left. I was on the 2nd Amtrak. Captain Kinders did not want me on the 1st Amtrak. He said, for obvious reasons, it hits a mine or something, then you're a casualty, and I don't have an 81 FO. And so I was on the 2nd Amtrak, and all the way back. And I don't remember what company or what platoon had the lead on this one. But we moved out, and as we went out the gate, their perimeter gate, we looked off to the left, and there was a sign there. And I wish I had my camera to take a sign of it, because on it, it had days, what was that? It said days. Well, anyway, it was a board, a bulletin board, an advertising board, and it had on when their last ambush was coming out of the thing on that road. And it was like, it was 2 or 3 days earlier they had been ambushed coming out of there. And I can understand why you don't cut the trees down that are on both sides of it. Give yourself a good field of fire and don't allow the enemy to conceal themselves. And so we paraded down in our Amtraks, and I think we had gone probably about 100 yards when the 1st Amtrak hit a mine, and it killed the driver of the Amtrak, and it wounded half a dozen or more of the Marines from Echo Company that were on top of the Amtrak, because when they were riding, they had their legs hanging over the side, and most of them received shrapnel wounds into their legs. Another Marine was wounded a little bit worse than that. So of course we have to stop. The Amtrak had hit a mine. The mine was a box mine. They estimated 50 pounds, and it blew the track off of it. And so they called to see if they couldn't get somebody to come down and drag the Amtrak up, but they didn't have anything big enough to haul the Amtrak back. So they'd have to come down and fix the track. And there was more wrong with it than the track, though. It needed to be repaired. So they just scuttled that one off to the side. They left it there. They put a guard on it. And then we took the wounded were taken back to 1-1's base camp, and they were to be medevac from there. That way we could keep going on. So as we got ready, I got on second Amtrak again. We proceeded down the road again. And again, we went about 50, 60 yards and boom, another mine went off. This one was worse because it was bigger, and it also killed the driver, and that I'll just say this: that Amtrak was filled with 50-gallon cans of diesel fuel. A diesel fuel that was probably for those Amtrak, so they could put gas in that thing while they're traveling around with us. And I don't know if they all had them in it, because I didn't look into them. They were closed when we got on them. But it started a fire inside there, a big fire, and the driver was killed, obviously, and he never got out. So we had another problem. We had more casualties, and we had more Echo Company casualties. Same thing, legs hanging over the side, and some of the Marines learned and didn't have their legs there, but a lot of them probably didn't think there'd be a second mine, and they certainly didn't think there'd be a third mine. But there was, and so we waited another. I guess we must have waited another 45 minutes to an hour, or put the fire out, and that Amtrak was probably a total loss. And so we did it again. We got saddled up, and the Amtraks went around the second Amtrak, and this time the CO of the Amtrak, he was a captain. I guess he was I don't know the designation for an Amtrak, but unit is. But being he's a captain, it'd probably be equal to that of a company commander or something. And these were his babies. So he decided that he was going to walk out in front of the Amtraks with a flashlight. And so we started moving very slowly. We're already an hour and 15 minutes, hour 30 minutes late to being at our checkpoint. But it can be helped. And so we're moving down the road again, and this Marine captain, he's walking, and he steps on the mine, and all I saw is part of his body go one way and part of his body go the other way. Now I jumped off the Amtrak like we all did, because we were all concerned with each one of the explosions that the enemy was going to open up from the tree lines that were there, but they didn't. And so we got out, and I went over to where that captain was laying, and Corman was over there, and he was still alive, but part of his torso was gone. Eyes were open. He was breathing. I think the shock of it, that he didn't realize what had happened until he looked up and looked at his leg. And Doc gave him a shot of morphine in his arm. And then he just put his head back and died. I mean, that also injured a couple of the Amtrak people. And a couple more Echo Company. I think we had something like 15 to 20 casualties before we even crossed the river. We hadn't even been in a fight yet. So, and I'm wondering, why would you not sweep this road before you do anything else when you're going to have a convoy of Amtraks with 160 Marines on it, somewhere in that area, and cause all this carnage. But they didn't, and at least until that time. Now with two Amtrak gone and 15 to 20 Marines wounded and dead, they decided to sweep the road, and it was light now by that time, and so they decided to sweep the road, and they swept it all the way down, with some Echo Marines providing security and for the engineers. And we got to the riverbank, and then we saddled up, and then we began crossing the river. And from the time we crossed the river and we got on this one island, it was just one firefight after another. I mean, it wasn't always big. Some of them, the enemy engaged, they were 20 or 30. Sometimes they were just a few snipers. But it seemed each time we had another casualty, and we just call in a medevac and then waste more time and then move on. And that just went on basically most of the day of the 16th, until we got to the point where we were approaching another river that we were supposed to cross and get onto another island, which would be the focus of the action on 17 September. So we didn't cross. We were in the Amtrak had already arrived, and we had to cross a rice paddy, an open rice paddy, it was probably, and surrounded by tree lines that had fighting holes in them. And we started crossing one platoon at a time using the dikes. And so the platoons, went, the platoon commanders either were in the front or the middle. They always chose where they wanted to be. And the first platoon got through okay. The second platoon crossed okay. And then when they crossed, they assembled, and I just stayed where I was at when I crossed. I just stayed where I was at. Captain Kinder was there, and I believe it was Lieutenant Moore who was there with us. He commanded first platoon, and we're sitting there, and we're waiting for his platoon to start to cross. And of course, the enemy waited this whole time. They could have opened up on the first platoon or the second platoon, but they waited until the third platoon crossed. And tactically, it was the right thing to do. You open up when the first one's coming, then you got a maneuver. You got two companies or two platoons of Marines that are going to maneuver against you. And so I think about half the platoon was across, and they started taking automatic weapons fire and then light machine gun fire. And Captain Kinder just looked at me and said, "Do they need help?" So from where I was at, I didn't even have to move. I could see where they were at in the tree line, and they were moving around. I mean, they would make it pretty easy. And the Marines, of course, were down on one side of the dike using it for cover. The machine gunner was in action. The Marines, we had 3, 4, 5 Marines down. And to make a long story short, I just called in a traversing fire mission from the far left flank of the enemy position to the far right flank, and I used 2 guns. I had one gun start on the coordinates on the left, one gun start on the quarter of the other corner, and then I just had them traverse across each other. And then as they went across, we could see as they made the first run across, the enemy began to move away to retreat. And so I knew they weren't going to come towards us. They probably had to go back the way they came. And so I told the mortar section to keep firing it, but add 100 meters. And I just got on the phone and called them, and their call sign, I believe, was Rock Mat Whiskey. And it was I think Rock Mat Whiskey 2. And I just told them to add 100, fire for effect. Don't even need to wait. Don't even need a spotter. Just fire the same thing you had. And so they did that. And the when the skipper was satisfied, there was no more fire coming from there. He just told me to cease fire. And we then, of course, the corpsmen are out working on the wounded. We got one of the platoons came out and provided security out front of us, walking towards that tree line. All the while, I'm just waiting for them to come back and take position in that same place again. And I was ready for them if they did it. That's the way I'd been trained. And they didn't do that. And so we were able to get medevac in, and the medevac did take ground fire because of the way it came in. It was told to come in from behind us, which would have been to the south, and they came in from the north. So, of course, they're going to take ground fire probably from that retreating unit. But we got the Marines medevac, and then we moved down to the river. That usually after a fight like that, we would recon the target area to go in and see what the damage was and see. But this was a funny operation because we had a schedule to keep. Even though we were already hours behind, we had to now be at that river for a crossing hour and a half ago. But then this happened. This fight I told you took place wasn't in 5 minutes like I told it. It was probably 45, 50 minutes. And then the medevac was called before the battle ended. And then we moved on and then we crossed the river without incident. And it was getting dark. And so Captain Pinder said, we're going to set up over here. And he showed us on the map. We set up in the village, around the village. We didn't actually go in the village. And we did that because we found that the local Viet Cong probably lived in the villages, and they would be reluctant to shoot mortars into the village. So we kept ourselves close to the people, not as a shield. But so we sat in there for the night. Everybody had their chow, their sea rats. And those that didn't, when it got dark, had to eat their sea rations cold. We sat in for the night. Everybody slept. We woke up early, so 06:30, I think it was. We were going to be on the road about 07. And I didn't eat that morning. I usually didn't eat till later in the day of an operation or a patrol or something like that. I really didn't have a stomach to eat. I did have a little coffee. I made some coffee from my sea rat. Put in a little chocolate powder that came with it and made some chocolate mocha coffee. I might have been the first one to do that. I could have made millions of dollars. But anyways, we began moving out, single file, one company at a time. Lieutenant Moore's company was in the lead. Lieutenant Poland's was second, and that we were with the headquarters unit was with Lieutenant Poland's platoon, generally right in the middle, and that composed the skipper. Generally, if the company gunny's with us, he would be there. Be a forward air controller, an artillery forward observer, the 81 forward observer, his radio operator, and anybody else he wanted there. Sometimes there were observers that came along from our company in S3 and things like that. And but this time it was just the normal ones that I mentioned. And as we came into this one area. There was a river to our right, and which would have been off to our east. There was a river there, and we were conscious of that river, and um, we moved on, and first platoon went through the opening. There was about 100-meter opening when we came out from behind the tree line where in the village that was there, and we came into the open. It was about 100 meters going to the west of open area and exposure to anything that was across the river. Nobody suspected anybody would be across the river. So first platoon was first to get hit. They got ambushed right up front. They were pinned down in a rice paddy, and they were unable to maneuver. I mean, they just Marines get up and they go down, and it's pretty difficult when you get trapped in the middle of a rice paddy, and freedom is another 100 meters maybe behind you. You're going to suffer a lot of casualties. So Skipper put out the word that he wanted reinforcements to go and help first platoon, and then when they got up and started to go, we took 50 caliber machine gun, 62 millimeter mortar, or was it 61? I don't know what the enemy had. I think it was 62 millimeter mortar, and a light machine gun. Opened up on his kill doc, Twee House, who was just back. He had been wounded 2.5 weeks before, and he had just gotten back with the company, and he was wounded helping a wounded Marine who was crossing the creek up in front of us, and he was up there trying to help him, and the machine gun took him out. And they also shot a scout with the artillery forward observer team, and he would later die. His name was John Peel, and so he was brought back. And then during the ambush itself, another Marine got hit in front of us, and that Marine was laying there while all this fire was going on. So I just ran out and grabbed him by the back of his suspenders, and I pulled him back to safety out of the line of fire. And he looked bad. I didn't think he was going to make it. He was already ashen. He was cyanotic, it looked to me, and I'd seen enough of death to know that that's not a good sign when someone's turning blue. Means their oxygen is going, which means they're bleeding out. And so that's when the skipper said, "Thumper, I need that fire off of me across the river." So I got up, and machine gunner for 2nd Platoon positioned himself to be able to provide cover fire, and some of the Marines who were off to the right in the squad or the platoon behind us, they were able to position themselves to provide cover fire. I told my radio operator to drop his radio, and I was training Ron DeFore at the time. That was Ron's first action, actually, as a forward observer. He went out with me on this op, and Ron, my radio operator, looked at me and he said, "No, where you're going, I'm going." I said, "Drop the radio. I need that radio. You stay here." I took my pack off and we put the radio on me. He wasn't happy about it. He let me know. But I said, "Look, there's a lot of fire. Not better that one get hit than three." And I said, about 40 meters, 40, 50 meters to get to the edge of the bank, because there was no really good position, except there was high ground. There was a mole at the end of the bank of the river which was perfect, provided perfect cover to call in that mission. And so I took off running, zigzagging as I ran, and I guess I had gone about 25, 30 yards, 30 meters, And then the 62, they started shooting 62 mortars, only two. I don't know why, but they only shot two 60 mortars. And I crawled the rest of the way and I got to where I was at. And I raised another 81 mortar section. That wasn't the first one that I fired. This one was I believe they were with the 2nd Battalion, 5th Marine. And I did the exact same thing because they were in line, probably about 60, 70 meters. I could literally see where the machine gun was firing from, and so could our machine gunner. But he wasn't placed well. He wasn't placed, tactically in a position that he could do anything with them. And so I just got on the radio and I called the fire mission in, and it got cleared, and I ended up firing about 80 rounds Hotel Echo on them. And then I stopped. I told the mortar section to cease fire, and I just wanted to wait and see if there would be any more fire coming from it. So I stayed, started to get up, and the Marines were behind us, were starting to get up. And again, more fire came. So I called them, didn't need to do anything. I had the coordinates and told them to do the exact same mission as the first one, and they traversed the target. One gun traversed the target one way and then back the other way. And this time there was no return fire coming when I ceased fire. Did learn later that the Auburn swept through there and found nine Viet Cong KIA, and there were 3 or 4 drag marks they saw, indicating at least somebody was wounded. In a case like that, the Marine likes to call it a probable kill. They're not dead till you see them, and so we took no more fire from that position, and I logged that fire mission. I logged it in case we had to come back through that way. I'd already have it online, and I gave it to the 81 Mortar Platoon, and they logged it. Check it. We called it a check, and it was a mission, and it was check 1. And when I came back, all I had to do was say my call sign and tell them check 1, and they'd know what to do. And then I went back to run, and I dropped the radio and gave it back to them. And then Captain Kinder said, "Now I need you to go up to Lieutenant Moore, and he needs a fire mission up there." And I probably had 70, 80 yards, I guess, to get up there. They were still being fired at, and the firefight was still going on. And so Ron and I, all 3 of us got up, and we just started moving towards the target. And we got halfway, and then the machine gun fire got really heavy, and a couple of times we started crawling. We knew we weren't going to be able to stay on our feet. We were in the middle of a graveyard to begin with. Provided some cover, but not a lot of cover. All I knew is the Marines were in a rice paddy, and so we continued to crawl. And I saw a little cover of some elephant grass off to the left, and I kind of started crawling a little bit towards it. It provided a little bit of cover, and then I saw Ron, the Ron I was training, Ron DeFore. He was crawling, and I saw a machine gun trail go right by him. Just missed him. Another 6 inches to the right, the machine gun trail was taking him out. So the Marines are still firing. They're in a battle, and so I finally made it to Lieutenant Moore, and Lieutenant Moore said, "Where are they?" And he said, "They're that tree line there." He said, "There's a lot of them there. There's one machine gun and a machine gun," and he pointed to it there. And I said, "Okay, Skipper, and anything else?" And so I got on, raised them again with a fire mission, and I gave it to them. They said send it, and then I gave them the coordinates and the azimuth or the azimuth, um, and they said they were sorry they had no more 81. I had expended their 81 ammunition, and of course I was a little hot then. I said it'd have been nice of you to tell me when you fired the last round that it was your last one. You can't fire anything. Do you have any Willie Peter? And um, he said, yeah. And I looked at the situation, and I didn't want to fire Willie Peter over those Marines. So I just told Lieutenant Moore, I said, they're expecting a resupply, but they have nothing else to fire. And so I said, we have artillery, sir. We can use artillery. And he said, we're 300 meters or so from the enemy target. And he was a bit concerned about a short round or just any of their artillery rounds being fired too long. And I just told him, I said, I can bring it in easy. I don't have to bring it right on top of it. And I said, I'll adjust it in on the left flank over there where the machine gun is, and I'll just take it gradually across. And I'll only use one gun, and I'll only use the 105, no 155s. He said, do it. So I did it, and it took me I think it was 3 adjustments to get on that target. And when that round hit that target, the Marines that were in the rice paddy, some of them, they kind of looked back. They were concerned at that point, and but I just traversed the artillery 105 right straight across that line, and I told them, make sure you level up after you fire every round, because that gun moves. It doesn't move a lot, but it moves enough to throw that next one off. So I told them to balance your bubble, make sure you got it balanced properly, and so those rounds don't go any farther towards the Marines. And they did a great mission, and it was, I mean, every time a round hit, you could see enemy soldiers blown, just being blown to bits. I mean, they were blown here and blown there every time a round hit. And by the time I had gotten from one end to the other, the enemy began to retreat. And so I continued the mission by telling them when they took off, I figured they went backwards. We didn't see them go to the flank. The river was on their flank. So I just fired again, told them to add 100, and they added 100, and don't know if it fell on them or not. And then I told them cease fire, and we waited. And then Skipper wants to know what's going on after about 3-4 minutes. And Lieutenant Moore told him, I think they've gone. They DD'd, and we got wounded here, and we need to get to them. So the wounded, they got up. The wounded, and I don't remember if there was any KIAs. I assume there were, but they picked the Marines up, and some of the Marines came forward, and they carried them back to a more secure position. And we called for a medevac. Well, when they came in from over the tree line where the enemy was, and they were in fighting holes, and as they flew over, they took ground fire, and the chopper refused to land. He said, I'm not going to land with that much firepower coming up. He said, my fuselage has already been penetrated, and the corpsman, whoever's talking on the deal, the corpsman's telling them some of these Marines will die if he doesn't get on the ground, and get on the ground now. And he refused. He flat out refused. It's his right to do it if he feels his aircraft is in jeopardy. And that's, I guess, the way they trained him. I knew a lot of officers who flew helicopters who did heroic things and come in, and I'm sure in a lot more fire than we were taking. And so he said, you got to get me another LZ. And he's, yeah, where we were at, we can't see any ground to land on. So skipper told him, he said, find an LZ close to where we're at. And so he found a place, and it was back. We came and to the east of us, and so we moved all the wounded and dead were moved over to there. He came in. A number of the Marines who might have survived, especially one, said he would have survived had they gotten him oxygen. But the corpsman worked on him, and I watched two of our corpsmen switching off, getting him uh, artificial respiration and cardiac massage, and he died about 2 minutes before the helicopter was on the ground, and said they could start taking casualties. And the Marines were mad. I mean, they were mad. There was talk of even shooting that aircraft down. That's how mad and angry they were, because there were Marines who died who didn't have to. It's the fog of war, though. These officers are told to bring their helicopter back, and but there isn't one Marine's life worth a helicopter. So we got our casualties out, and we took no more fire from that open area across the river. And then we got word that we're not to go forward. We were supposed to go through that tree line where they ambushed us and go up and set up a blocking position. Now that the battalion commander of 1-1 has changed it, we were to go someplace else. We would catch Amtraks, and the Amtraks would take us to cross the river that we just got ambushed at. And so we had to walk to meet the Amtraks over where there was a road. It was 1,000 meters away at least, maybe even further than that. And we went over there. The Amtraks were waiting, and we started climbing aboard the Amtraks, and we hadn't moved 50 yards, and they ambushed the Amtraks. So we jumped down, and there's a firefight going on with the enemy, and casualties, of course, and then the enemy flees. It was always a frustration. Hit, and then if they weren't considerably larger than your unit, they weren't going to stay, and they didn't stay. And so we medevaced again, and then we got on the Amtraks again, and then we made it to the river, and they just dropped us off there. And Captain Kinder got on. He called the skipper of 1-1. He said, they just dropped us off on this river. And he told him, yes, you have to try to cross it. And he said that we just had Amtraks here. We can't cross this river. You can tell the current is moving too swiftly. And he said, just try and see what you can do. So we had a sergeant in one of the platoons in Echo, who they tied a rope on him, and he went in the water, tried to get across, and he was going to tie that rope on, and then we would jury rig stuff. We could all do that. Nobody wanted to do that. Nobody wanted to go and fight these guys that bad that they had to go into a river with their gear on. And so the guy who did it, he didn't make it but halfway. He said, you can't send anybody here. The current's too strong. And he came back, and they told him that the current was too strong. There's no way you're going to cross here. We need Amtraks. So they told him to wait one. And we ended up waiting a lot longer than 1 minute, more like an hour. And the battalion commander of 1-1 told us to just stand down. He said there were no Amtraks available, because they were moving these other companies that were in the operation as well, and there was none available for us right now. So we waited. We just continued to wait the rest of the day. I mean, no action. Skipper set up perimeter, and we waited and we waited and waited, and we could hear firefights, and they finally got back to us. I don't know, it was late in the afternoon, and uh, they said, we're going to send Amtrak's to you. We're going to bring you back to your original staging area before your attack of today, and you'll wait there until the next morning, and they'll get back to us and let us know what they want to do. So that's what we did. We went back, and everybody was frazzled at that point. It was one of those hurry up and wait type Marine things. And so we went back, and everybody caught some chow. We set the perimeter up, and still not knowing what the next day was gonna bring. And so the next morning, we were up early, and he gets a call. He said that our involvement, meaning Echo 25's involvement in the operation, is being suspended. You'll go back to the river for a river crossing to get back to that first river we crossed after we left that morning, and they'll take you across the other river to the other side. Go to 1-1's base camp and wait there for evacuation back to Anwal. It ended that quick, but 1-1 and 2-1 continued the operation. So wasn't an easy thing, getting back to where we were going. A lot of sniper fire. Marines went down, and it just allowed me to use more artillery and mortar rounds. And I don't. The person who wrote the command chronology for that operation got it pretty right. But again, it's still impersonal, and you don't learn about the guys like Doc Tweehouse, who ran a great distance to get to the guy who was wounded only to be shot down. To me, that's conspicuous gallantry. I don't know if he got a medal or not, but he should have. And John Peel, who died right in front of me. I was kneeling beside him when he died. We were good friends. He was in the artillery Echo 211 battery. He got tired of not seeing the war. He wanted to see action, and so he volunteered to be a forward observer. And on this operation, it was his second op. He was a scout, and scouts basically spotted the targets for the forward observers, because forward observers are busy and calling for they're letting the units know that they're going to maybe calling a fire mission, and so but so we well, let's just move on from that. Anyways, we caught helicopters back to Anwar, and while we were waiting at Hoi An to fly back, Skipper and the three lieutenants called me over, and Captain Kinder said, I wanted you to know I'm going to put you in for the Silver Star. And I said, I just looked and shrugged my shoulders and said, thank you. And what else can you say? Whatever. I didn't really care at that point. We had, I don't know, I guess we gave more than we got. I don't know. It didn't seem like we did at the time, but to suspend it all of a sudden, it seemed like there was more to do and to go back. And so we went back to Anwar. That was that would have been the 18th or 19th, I guess, because we spent one night in Hoi An. So that would have been 17. That would have been the 19th. We got back to Anwar, and it was in that operation that Ron told me. He told me he said that operation changed. And one thing I forgot to say is that artillery officer that always harassed and it messed with me. He was on this operation. He had never been on any operation, but he came on this operation, I think, because he thought it was going to be an easy one. But I said some things to him, and of course, he had Cheney. Lance Corporal Cheney was the forward observer artillery who always went with us, but his boss was that lieutenant, and Cheney was with us, and I asked him, I said, what in the hell were you doing when this is all going on? Because I didn't hear any artillery fire from him or nothing. And of course, I was using a lot of expletives by that point. And but we got back to Anwa, and then 3 days later, my CO forced me to go on R&R. I had never intended to go on R&R. I gave all my money to the Marine Corps. Had set up a savings plan that you could put any or all of your money in the saving plan, and when you got home, you could cash it in. It's 10%. You draw 10% off your money. So I did that and kept $20 to get stuff from a flying PX we had come in, shaving gear and razor blades, toothpaste, and things like that. So I just told him, I said, I don't have money for that. I said, my money's all going into my savings plan. And he said, you're going. And so he raised money for me from the guys in the 81 Mortar Platoon in Echo Company. And they come over and gave me the money, said, you're going to Hawaii. I didn't get to choose where I wanted to go. They just said, you're going to Hawaii. And that's where I went my birthday was the 20th the next day. And I think I left on the 25th to go. And I came back on October the 3rd. So that was, for me, that was September. That was all of September. Early before at the same time Swift was going on, Echo was conducting platoon and squad size patrols in the Animal Basin there. Suffered booby traps, more casualties that way. And so when R&R came, I said I didn't really want to go, but I was so happy to get out of there. And I flew to Hawaii, and we landed at Honolulu, and the Chamber of Commerce for the island of Maui had given 3 presents to 3 of the people that were on the flight, and they all got to go to Maui for 5 of their 7 days, all expenses paid, in a beautiful hotel. And I was one of them chosen. And I didn't even know if I wanted to go to Maui. And I met a few guys on the plane, and we were going to go get drunk. But I decided to go. And the other 2 guys that went, they had their wives with them. So I was like, I was the, what do they call that? I was the oddball. And they just said, oh, don't worry, we'll get you a date when you get there. And so I spent my time on Maui, and then I came back. I promised a friend of mine whose brother was the manager of the dunes. It was a combination strip joint, rock, and country western place. And so I went there, and I told him I'd go say hi to him. I gave him something for his brother in the package, and then he wouldn't let me buy a drink the rest of the night. So I got pretty blitzed. And the next day I missed my wake-up call, and I missed my flight back to Vietnam. So I had to do another one of those when I got back to Anwa, and my skipper finds out, he got a report. And again, I had problems with the Marine or the Army officer. He said, you're not going to miss your flight tonight. You're going to sleep in the Honolulu airport tonight. And it made me get my gear, drove me there, and left me. So we don't want you to miss your flight. And he made a bunch of expletives about the Marine Corps as well. And when I got back, same thing, different skipper. And And the honest truth was, I made a call. I asked the front desk for a wake-up call. And the plane left at 7, and I told them I wanted to be up at 5:45 because the bus left at 6:30. And I never got it. That was honest truth. And I told the captain, and the captain said, "Well, the guy whoever it was, he said that you did give him a call." I said, "I did." I said, "I remember the time it was because I got in there around 1 o'clock in the morning." And uh, so I said, "Well," I said, "he's bad. He's terribly mistaken." And wanted to know if I was calling him a liar. And I said, "He's terribly mistaken." So I got back, and again, my commanding officer, he blew it off. I wasn't insubordinate or anything. He just blew it off, and he just said, "Don't make this a habit." So,
Well,
but that was it for me at all of September.
well, and through that, I mean, Ballistic Charger is 17 September is one day that you definitely remember anniversary wise, but it's one day of a long war from
Yeah,
your experience. And for you,
yeah,
you had many days, but
yeah.
um before we bring things to a close today, I wanted to, for our viewers, you mentioned Doc Tweehouse, and I wanted to bring up Doc Tweehouse and his
Okay.
face. And this is on the virtual wall, and you
Yeah.
can find, as you would know, you can find anybody on the virtual wall, their name
Mhm.
specifically, but I wanted to bring that personal connection because this is something that you distinctively remember. And this is something
Yeah.
that will always be
Thank
with
you.
you, is witnessing Doc Tweehouse go above and beyond the call of duty, go above and beyond his job to risk his life for another Marine.
That's what he did, and he was a good man. And I thank you for showing his picture and his name, and hopefully what he did will live on in these videos, because these are the guys that deserve it. The guys that didn't come home. Yeah, I was a grunt who was fortunate enough. Um, I didn't escape harm. Yeah, I was wounded a couple of times, but I wasn't dead, and for that I was extremely grateful when I got home. But these are the guys that uh, that that Marines love them. That's why they call them devil dogs, and um, we lost a few of them during Ted, even doing the exact same thing, running one Doc Stanton. He ran out in a rice paddy to tend to two wounded Marines who everybody believed were dead. They weren't moving, and he got to them, and machine gun killed him right there. So that's what they did. That's what they do. That's what they were trained to do. And there, to me, there just didn't seem to be any fear in these guys. I mean, and he was probably one of the better examples of it. So
Well,
I thank you for that.
and through that, I mean, for myself, I've been to the Vietnam Wall 4 times, and the first time I went, I mean, it was, sorry, the lights went off, but it was moving, most certainly, but I didn't have a connection yet. I hadn't really begun my Vietnam research. I hadn't truly begun to learn about the names on the wall in the individual stories. But since then, growing close with Marines, I'm very close with Marines from Charlie 1-4.
Mhm,
Close with Marines now from 2-5 due to our interactions, and 1-5.
mhm.
But each time you go back, being able to, for me as a historian, to point out a name on the wall and tell that individual story,
Yeah,
that means that
yeah,
I'm carrying on the legacy for people who can't speak because of men like you, Mike, who are
yeah,
willing to share
mm,
their story and the story of those you fought with me.
yeah. Well, I think we didn't even touch the story about the attack on Nansong. Um, a lot of heroism on Nansong, and that was on the night of July 3rd to 4th. I'd like to touch that personal heroism of a lot of guys. I mean, I wasn't on the hill when it was attacked. I was near the mouth of Antenna Valley. That's the reason they had sent us out there. But and we had to rush back at 12, 1 o'clock in the morning in pitch dark to get to Nansong to help Fox 25. And so that's a story I would like to share with everybody. Um, because because I lost probably more of the friends that I knew from Foxtrot, and of course 481 mortarmen died that night. That Danny Reesberg was killed that night, and doc or oh gosh, their names slipped me now, and I should know them. Walt Bushlighter, Harold Ray, or Ron Reyes. They were all members of the 81 Mortar Club, and two guys that I had befriended who were Army guys. They ran we had searchlights up on the hill. They ran the searchlights. They were killed. We had men on the Four Deuce. These guys aren't usually up on top of that hill. They were sent because there was increased enemy activity in Ninh Binh Valley, and they wanted more firepower to be able to be provided from the mountain. And so it's a truly good story. There's a book out. It's called Gunner's Glory. It's written by my friend Johnny Clark, who was a machine gunner.
Yep.
Yeah, Johnny. It's called Gunner's Glory, and it details the account of the non-song from the Marines who were there. My story's in it. The story of the grunts who were there when the ambush or when the enemy overran the outpost. To wondering how they did it to come up that hill that was almost straight up and down. But it's just a great story, and the man who had to endure that. I mean, I got to the hill as the enemy was leaving. I did have the opportunity to do some things. I fired on their routes of regress, and hopefully I got a lot of them, but I don't know. But the guys on the hill that night fought that out. And so we can go back and share that if you'd like.
I think for our next episode, and we'll get together hopefully this Sunday. I
Okay.
think that's what we'll lead off with. Is we'll start with
All right.
Non-Song, and to remember your friends at Non-Song, and I'll do the same thing I did for Doc Tweehouse. I'll pull up their photographs so we can have them,
Okay.
and the legacy lives on, my friend.
All right. I'll okay, that'll be fine. Yeah, that'll be fine. I got pictures of those guys, so I might send them to you, and you can share them, put a face on the actions they did. So that would be great.
That. Thank you, Mike.
Okay.
Once
You're
again,
welcome.
my friend, thanks for your service and welcome home, Mike.
Thank you very much. Anytime, my friends.